Sometimes the enemy isn't in the air. It's in the memory. In the skies over Europe during the Second World War, flying didn't always mean coming back. And for the men who crossed the horizon aboard a P-51 Mustang, returning wasn't always a triumph. Sometimes it was a sentence. Among the most devastating operations of the conflict, one left an indelible scar on the Allied squadrons: the raids over Schweinfurt and Regensburg. Those missions, designed to destroy the industrial heart of the Reich, became synonymous with extreme sacrifice. And though losses were counted in planes and men, the deepest wounds were invisible, the ones etched into the minds of the pilots. The P-51 Mustang, pride of Allied engineering, had been born to escort bombers on what often seemed a one-way flight. Its range, speed, and maneuverability made it the spearhead of the aerial offensive. But not even its flawless design could shield the men inside its cockpit from the mental toll of the sky. The radio was filled with screams. It was like listening to the end of the world. When a bomber went down, you didn't have time to look back. You just kept going and hoped you wouldn't be next, they said. During the Schweinfurt raids, Allied squadrons faced a floating hell. German flak, precise and relentless, turned the route into a death trap. Hundreds of B-17 flying fortresses crossed the skies not knowing if they'd ever return. The P-51 pilots, tasked with protecting them, had to choose between chasing enemy fighters or staying beside the wounded giants. No choice was good. Each one had a cost. Official reports spoke of catastrophic losses. Nearly a quarter of the formations never came back. What they didn't record was the number of pilots who, after those missions, never flew again. Some called it combat fatigue. Others simply having seen too much. But in the squadrons, the most feared phrase was another: "I've lost the air." It meant the pilot had reached his psychological limit, that the roar of the engine was no longer a promise, but a threat. Many of these men were aces, with dozens of confirmed victories. Heroes in the reports, ghosts in reality. Some after one final mission, the one that shattered the balance between duty and survival, simply refused to climb back into the cockpit. They sat in silence beside the hangar, staring at the remnants of the wings that had once carried them to glory, and said, "No more." It wasn't cowardice. It was humanity. On August 17, 1943, the dawn over England brought with it a roar of engines that echoed like a warning. It was the beginning of a bold operation, calculated down to the last second, to strike simultaneously at Regensburg, where the feared Messerschmitt fighters were built, and at Schweinfurt, the heart of Germany's ball-bearing industry. Two coordinated blows, two spears meant to pierce the soul of the Third Reich. But no one imagined that this mission would become an open wound, not only for the enemy, but for those who carried it out. The pilots of P-47s and P-51s, assigned to escort the formations, knew their coverage would have a limit. The Mustang's range was not yet complete. Beyond the Rhine, the bombers would be exposed. They knew it. And still, they took off. For hours, Allied formations crossed the heart of Germany, facing a storm of steel. Enemy fighters awaited them, and the sky erupted in fire. Explosions, smoke, and the echo of voices calling for help. The P-51 pilots fought not only the enemy, but their own helplessness. They couldn't be everywhere. Every choice, chasing a fighter or turning back to cover a bomber, meant leaving someone behind. The mission went on, but the cost was unbearable. More than 60 bombers shot down, hundreds of crewmen missing, and a new, invisible enemy: trauma. In the reports that followed, commanders spoke of a tactical success with heavy losses. But among the hangars, the pilots didn't speak. They only looked at each other in silence, eyes hollow, hands trembling. Some refused to fly again. Others asked to be reassigned, and some simply vanished, walking toward the horizon without ever looking back. There is no victory in this, only names we will never say again. When I close my eyes, I still see them falling. If this is duty, I'd rather stay on the ground." In the days that followed, the units began to note a troubling phenomenon: pilots refusing to fly. Some did so quietly, others with tears they could no longer hide. The Air Force called them broken. But the truth was different. They had reached the limit of what a human being can bear. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission was a breaking point, not only because of the losses, but because it revealed something war didn't want to admit. Even the bravest can break. The aces of the air, those men who once seemed made of steel, didn't fear death. They feared watching everyone else die again. And when the war finally ended, many of them didn't celebrate victory. They withdrew in silence, decorated for bravery, but marked by guilt. In interviews years later, some confessed that that mission was the moment they stopped flying, even if their hearts kept beating. In the history books, their names appear beside medals, units, and squadrons. But what the records don't tell is what they left behind in the air. The P-51 Mustang was a symbol of supremacy, yes, but also a witness to fragility. Because in that war, not everyone who came back truly returned. In every war, there are stories that never make it to the front pages. Not because they lack heroism, but because they reveal the cost of it. The men of the P-51 Mustang, once symbols of power and precision, carried home something heavier than medals. They brought back the silence of the skies, a silence filled with faces, echoes, and memories they could never escape. Long after the guns went quiet, many found themselves still fighting, not in dogfights over Europe, but in the quiet corners of their minds. Some tried to rebuild lives among families, towns, and fields that could never understand the thunder still ringing in their chests. Others chose solitude, seeking peace in the only way they knew, by staying grounded. For them, victory was not a celebration. It was survival, and survival came with its own burden, to remember what others could forget. The story of the P-51 pilots who refused to fly again is not one of failure, but of revelation. It reminds us that courage is not infinite, that even the strongest spirit can fracture under the weight of loss, duty, and memory. War measures success in missions completed, targets destroyed, and territories won. But history rarely counts the invisible casualties, the minds left adrift, the souls too weary to take flight once more. The skies over Europe bore witness to their valor, but also to their breaking. And perhaps the greatest lesson they left behind is this: that heroism is not only found in those who keep fighting, but also in those who have the strength to say, enough. As the last contrails fade into the horizon, we are left with a truth both haunting and humane. Not every battle is fought with bullets, and not every victory returns home. Some are carried quietly, like whispers in the clouds by men who once soared above the world and came back forever changed. It wasn't fear, it was memory, and some memories weigh more than any sky.